Alright, so today in court, we got through 3 witnesses. It was crazy, but it was also interesting. They were all kind of the same type of psychiatrist where they either the like intake or outtake assessments for competency. Although one wasn't even a competency assessment, one was just like a, or I guess it was, but it was just for possession of alcohol as a minor. I don't know. But anyway, I had not realized how many times this guy had been in the prison system previous to like the actual crime that we're there for. Now the possession of alcohol as a minor is the like earliest one, but she didn't actually see him. It was like in 2015. She didn't see him until 2017. Crazy. But then there was another person, the first person for the first incident, which was a domestic violence incident, assault incident, and that was in 2015 also. And then there were 2 instances in 2016 and then one in 2017. I don't know, the timeline is really confusing, and it's like all of these things and then they'll be like, oh yeah, and this other one that was on this date, and you're like, what? When did that happen? Like, I feel like they just need to give us a timeline. But anyway, they got through the 3 witnesses fairly quickly, kind of because they all had sort of the same thing to say, like, this is how his demeanor was, this is what I knew at the time, this was my diagnosis. It's really clear this guy had a schizophrenic break. It seems like all the psychiatrists all agree on that. But like whether or not that means he's competent, it seems like, and at first I was like, you know, like you can medicate schizophrenia and like you can be competent. But it seems like all of their diagnoses basically were that like, no, he's not competent to stand trial. And he never has been since 2015. Nobody has ever thought he was. No psychiatrist has ever thought so. And I was like, that's quite a history. That sets a precedent. But at the same time, like, he's rarely taken his medication regularly. He's rarely been in a facility long enough to like let treatment actually take its course. He's refused medication a lot of times. As far as I can tell, he's never actually been completely on medication for more than a couple of weeks at a time, and some of the time that was forced, it sounds like. It's like, would he do better on forced treatment? It sounded like probably. Is that what we're there about? And I don't really know. It's like, it's getting kind of confusing. Like, if none of their diagnoses found him competent at those times, why is he competent to stand trial this time? But if he got sufficient treatment, which it sounds like he probably didn't get, even though he was checked into facilities again and again and again, maybe he still could. I don't know, like at the moment I'm really on the fence in that regard, and I see I didn't charge my camera. But it's sort of, that's the pace the trial is going, and nothing I think is ever going to be as shocking as them showing the incident. But maybe I should not say that now. I mean, maybe something could be as shocking as that, but it feels like we've gotten a lot of the same kind of thing, like the same kinds of things from psychiatrists, and really what I want is the whole outline rather than all these like picked around bits and pieces. It's so confusing and so hard to follow. I just want to know like everything leading up, but not like that I have to create my own timeline. I just want it given to me so I can just be like, boom, 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 these are all the events. But it's like, it's all over the place. It's so hard to keep track when we're actually there, and I hope they like give us a little more guidance in that regard. We're in week pretty much 3 since it's like first jury duty call of this, and my employer is complaining to me, and it's just like, what can I do? I can't do anything. I can be here 2 days a week. That's it. And frankly, I'm not very happy that you didn't kind of take care of things while I was gone, and kind of mad at my boss right now, and I'm not sure I want to keep being in that profession. So I've been a little distracted, and I think it's just showing how stressful my job is and how poorly we're treated there when I'm away from it for a longer period of time. Like, you get some outside perspective and suddenly it's like, we're really not treated that well, and it's not going to get better, and I should probably take a stand about it. I've brought it up and been brushed off multiple times, and I've asked for the kind of help that we need and been brushed off multiple times, and it is like, it's probably time to quit. But quitting during a pandemic when people aren't hiring or like people are desperately trying to find jobs is not ideal. We'll see. I need to come up with something. Anyway, okay, bye. Okay, it's so hot, so I have the fan on in case there's any like weird noise. It's probably the fan, but I can't not have it on right now. For context, it apparently broke the record for hottest day today here. It's like 92, and normally we don't get 90s past July. Hey, what you doing back there? And I can't open any windows because the smoke is pretty bad. We're anticipating getting all the smoke up from California. Apparently the wind changed, and all that smoke is headed towards us. We were getting the smoke from the west side of the state, and now we're gonna get more smoke. So that's a ton of fun. But anyway, so it's very hot here. I don't have AC I can use. Hey, could you not scratch the furniture? Thank you. I don't have AC I can use because it doesn't fit perfectly into the window. There's not like a seal. Normally it just blows the air out, and then AC for the room. I have a little stand unit. I can't put that up because there's a crack and the smoke gets through. So we're just using fans. That's how we're gonna do it. But anyway, so I want to talk to you about the last 2 days in court because that's what this is all about. And I didn't film yesterday because it was kind of a shorter day. It's kind of been, we've been kind of playing like musical psychologists, basically. So we just been getting more and more and more, like 3 one day, 2 another, you know, like just keeping on getting psychologists in to talk. And it turns out we've never had a psychiatrist. I was just realizing one of the like medical doctors, the ones who prescribe, it's just been the ones who assess. So we've had tons and tons and tons of those. And we finally sort of have a timeline that's a little bit nuts. Actually, it was really sad. We got a lot of timeline today that kind of made me a little bit sad, and it's that in 2015 the mom first noticed like a serious hey Pie is maybe not feeling good, and I can't tell if it's because of the smoke. Something specific though, it's like he sounds weird, but he's eating, drinking normally, everything else is fine, he just meows weird, so keeping an eye on him, but don't knock over the camera. Okay, but so his mom noticed in 2015 the defendant's mom noticed something was wrong, that like his affect was wrong, and that he appeared to be starting to have hallucinations, and she took him in for an assessment at that time, and he was given medication, and it seems like from then things kind of got worse and worse and worse. In 2016 he was back in facilities like again and again and again, and one of the times it was for attacking his dad with a 2x4, and so this just kept like amping up, and he kept going in and getting treatment, and he'd get like what the maximum treatment was for that time, and it was usually, I think it was like 2 weeks for one thing that he could possibly be there for, which was just like, and like they went back again. Actually, the year the incident happened, beginning of that year, the mom took him back again and was like, hey, everything is really bad, and he went for another assessment, and he got more medication, and it sounds like he really didn't take medication on his own out in the community, that he wanted to just like self-medicate with marijuana. And one of the psychologists today mentioned that marijuana is actually pretty dangerous for someone with schizophrenic disorder because it can just make everything a lot worse. They keep touching on meth as well, that he got treatment for meth, but then don't seem to have anything to back that up either, so that's been weird. But okay, so 2016, like just back in the facility, and I was just thinking about it, and I've been talking about it, I mentioned it with like people talking about defunding the police, and like what would that look like what then happens, and especially in a case like this that's like so violent, and like, I mean, listening to the little girl, one of the other jurors mentioned after listening to her testimony, like, how can you justify defunding the police when you hear something like that? And it's like, well, they got there too late. Like, the police didn't help with that particular case, unfortunately, but where it could have been caught easily if some of that money that the police department is given, their allotment, if half of that had been allotted several other places, one of those being the education system. He clearly had like attention and behavioral problems rather than like an IQ problem in school. But if there had been more funding, more resources for teachers and for him at that time in his school days, maybe some of this could have been caught earlier, maybe he could have been diagnosed with something earlier, like possibly something could have been caught, but we know that our school systems are grossly underfunded. Another place would be like social workers, that once something has been shown, like his mom's bringing him in for help, that gets followed up with, that gets then treated properly, that the resources are there the first time in social work, that social workers coming around being like, hey, everything okay, before he starts hitting his dad with a 2x4, before he gets anywhere else after that. And then the medical field, that a big allotment of money should be going towards drug rehabilitation and towards mental health rehabilitation. Like, they kept mentioning these very short periods of time that were like as much as the facility was allowed to spend for treatment. And one of the psychologists mentioned, like, in 30 days for something like schizophrenia, you might see improvement of what they call the positive symptoms, like hallucinations, let's say, for example. Those might go away in 30 days, possibly. You would expect that, but you would not necessarily expect the negative symptoms, which are like the flattened demeanor and some of the other cognitive issues. You would never expect those to go away in 30 days, that those would require months of treatment. But there's just not the resources for that. Like, they could not have probably kept people in the facility that long. Like, they probably don't have the doctors or the staff for people staying longer like that. And they likely have them there absolutely as long as they possibly can. Not that it's what medically would be necessary, but I just think, like, if he had gotten treatment for longer the first time and was able to get help the first time, his mom may had never have died, and she was trying to get help and the systems just were not in place. So by the time it gets to that police phone call, like, there are so many places that needed the funds to have not let the whole family down previously. I mean, ultimately in the end, the police having all that funding didn't save his mom's life. And there are so many steps that could have. And so that's my thought on it. It shouldn't be the police's job to deal with something that's outside of just enforcing laws and stopping criminal activity. And that should be everything they do. And they're sort of expected to take on all these other roles where there are so many places that would have prevented anything like this from happening. And those places are needing the funding. Like, they're requiring it. And it's just so many places where we're failing as a society, and like, this should never have happened. That his mom brought him back twice for help, and that he was going to all these facilities and seeing all these people who were like, hey, this isn't enough, and yet it never got to be enough because there wasn't the resource there for it to be enough, to the point where he clearly suffered a psychotic break that made him kill his mother. I mean, when they started off this case, they said it's a sad situation, and it is a sad situation, and it's the kind of situation where, like, they don't have a strong defense. And I realize that's why we're here for a competency hearing. Like, that's kind of become very clear from the evidence they've shown us thus far. There's no reasonable way for them to plead not guilty in his case. There's not. I mean, if they struck a different kind of plea deal, then sure, but there's no reasonable way they could plead not guilty. Is he competent to stand trial or not is what we're trying to determine. And it sounded like all these psychiatrists have seen him over and over. And we got some juicy news today that one of the psychiatrists, the first time she watched the interview, was surprised that he answered questions so quickly, and was like, we've never seen that in a clinical setting, that he answers quickly like that. And I thought that was also interesting. I also wonder, most of the psychologists have been women, and I wondered if perhaps he didn't, and then the two detectives were men. I wonder if he's just one of those kind of sexist dudes. But one psychologist was male, and he noted similar things, so I kind of threw out that theory. But, you know, it was there in the back of my head for a while as we're seeing so many psychologists, but there was one guy. It's been interesting. Yeah, they're piecing together more pieces of the puzzle finally now, that, like, so many events led up to this last event. It's really sad. the whole thing is really sad, and like maybe he doesn't understand that he's an heir apparent. Well, maybe he didn't intend to do it, and they do keep mentioning like, yeah, a lot of like not seeming to show emotion about his mom being dead. That's something that happens with schizophrenics, and he has trouble necessarily retaining information that like it's not going in and it's not coming back out properly, and like there doesn't seem to be any way he could go back into society. But with proper treatment, could this have been avoided? And like, is it fair to have him stand trial for a heinous crime and maybe plead no contest, plead insanity or something like that? Is it fair to do that to someone if maybe, even though he like over time understands, would not understand what was happening day to day on the trial, that would take too long to compute, or wouldn't form itself completely in his brain, and wouldn't necessarily be able to understand that like he's getting locked away for life? And it's like, I don't know, but at the same time, like clearly you can't go back out into society, like you can't go back and be around your family after that. I don't see how you could justify that given everything. And it is sad because it shouldn't have come to that. There should have been more that many places and many people were capable of doing for him, and it sounds like so many people with the resources that they had available to them did their best, and that is just not anywhere near enough in a case like this, and that they need the funding and they need the resources so that something like this isn't able to happen again, because it's caught and treated and taken care of much earlier. And so that's how I feel about that. Hi, okay, so this is supposed to be the last week of the trial. I didn't film yesterday. To be perfectly honest, I think I have a migraine coming on and I'm having cramps. So that all started yesterday, it's just ongoing today. So I'm gonna try and remember as much as possible from yesterday and just keep going. Yesterday we had like 4 different witnesses, and I'm having trouble remembering who all of them were, but this time it wasn't psychologists. We had a detective who was at the scene, and it was kind of weird and kind of pointless. She was like the detective who had bagged the evidence of the bloody sweatshirt, and she was the detective who she'd like gone around with the canine unit. She said she had talked to the sister, but she also like, nobody is asking about those things. Like we have no testimony about what the sister said of the event other than her phone call, and that is it. And like multiple people said they talked to her and then just they kind of dropped that, which like she'd still be young at this point, so it's fair. But so we talked to that officer, and then it became very clear that the defense had wanted her to be the canine unit. No, the canine unit just needed another officer to go along the walk with them, and she happened to be available. She's like, no, I don't work with the canine unit. I don't know what he alerted to. I don't know any of that. And it became clear that that's who they'd wanted, was the person who actually did the canine unit. So it was just like, what are you talking about? And then they brought back a detective from earlier in the case and asked him like one question, and then like went on to the next one. I cannot remember who the other one yesterday was, but it was another one where it was just like same old. Oh, I do remember. It's the person who's like in charge of the staff on the ward. And that was basically, she's just like, yeah, I'm just in charge of the staff on the ward. So they had a lot of like kind of useless people. And then they brought on Dr. Morrison. And this guy likes to talk. We're still doing him today. If he could have had a full day just him, I think he'd have done it. He is chatty as heck. So they started yesterday. I mean, just the chatty. And then we started with him in the morning, but then there was a conflict, so we had to bring on someone like in between. So they stopped his, and he had just been chatty. And I'll go into him at the end. But then they brought on the father, which I guess was a little bit unexpected, but it was also like really good to hear from family member. And he did need a translator, so they had a translator voice box. It wasn't a phone, it was like a little device. And she was having a lot of trouble hearing everybody, so it was actually kind of awkward. He gave testimony in Spanish, and then she translated and back and forth. And the defense attorney was really bad at that. He just kept doing his like long rambly things, and she'd need to like cut him off to get the word in. And so I feel like he got frustrated, and that's why the questions were so short. But the dad's was really short testimony. He said that the first time the changes started was around 12 years old, which he said, I mean, like, and what anyone would think, kids start changing at that age. Like, he has an older brother, they'd already gone through that once, so like kids start changing at that age. But he said once he had stopped going to school, and once he had like started doing drugs and like becoming aggressive and really like blanking out, that was when they really noticed the problem, and that he had attacked him significantly before. And then we talked to the brother also after lunchtime. They had the brother just on the phone because they said he was out of the country. So the brother then talked about how like this was kind of an ongoing thing, and the brother really hit home. Like, they had tried so many places to get help for him. They had been looking so hard for an inpatient, and because he wouldn't go voluntarily, a lot of places would not take him, and they wouldn't take him unless there had been a significant violent crime, which obviously now that's happened, but that it has to become murder before they can take him for an inpatient when it's clearly a problem and he has a history of attacking the family members. He said that the other time he'd been incarcerated was when he had attacked him, the brother. And it's so sad because the two of them were working together. Like, the dad has a landscaping business, and the older brother was helping him that day when the murder happened. And it was really sad. And both of them said, like, yeah, obviously the number one thing they want is they want him to get treatment. They want him to get better. Like, that's what they had been trying for before this happened. And they also, at least the father said that he had never attacked the mother or the sisters before. Any of his aggression had always been towards the father and the brother. So this kind of, I mean, obviously came out, it was unexpected, but it came out of nowhere. And they said that it would just be like agitation, and both of them mentioned times when he would be talking to someone, they'd ask who it was, and he'd say, oh, it was someone who just left, or he'd say he was hearing voices, or he would say people were following him. And then when we got back to Dr. Morrison, he said he had actually thought most likely his true diagnosis was paranoid schizophrenia, which obviously all the paranoid delusions, and he said it was pretty classic. And man, this guy could talk. But anyway, he was the psychiatrist on the ward for the second 90-day stay after the defendant had been checked in after the incident. He had a previous 90-day stay, he had a second 90-day stay, and this guy said that his main thing was he wasn't always sure that when people said they were medication compliant that they actually were. So one of his big like things that he always does is make sure people are complying to their medication, like has the nurses crush up the meds so they can't like cheek it, like hide it somehow, because some of them are very good at that. So he said that absolutely making sure that they're medication compliant. He's a little more aggressive with it, trying to get to what the max dosage is to then see how they progress. But he kept saying by the time when he had been at least medication compliant while he was in jail previously, so he had been on medication. He said by the time he came in, he did say he had previously had auditory hallucinations, but he didn't appear to be having them then. It seems like, yeah, like everyone's like, yeah, he's schizophrenic, but that he was doing pretty well by the time. He also talked about he had seen the tape recording, and the part I wrote down was really interesting to me. I thought he said that whether or not his reasons, like his reasoning, his excuses make sense, the excuses he used during the like interrogation, like that, oh, I didn't do it kind of things, the reasons he used were not a sign of mental illness. He said that like someone who is actually like suffering delusions, someone who was like currently suffering a mental health crisis, would normally give responses that would be like, demons were attacking my mom and I was protecting her, but she's already gone over to Satan. He said it would be things that were pretty out there. But being like, oh, she was hitting herself, comes across not as something that is indicative of a psychosis. And I thought that was good to like do the distinction. He's like that it would be much more in line with the psychosis for it to have been way out there, but that she's hitting herself more sounds like he's just really not doing a good job of trying to come up with something that would look better, and that he felt like he was mentally competent at the time of the interview. And it was really funny because they went on for hours It was literally hours. We ended late today and he's coming back tomorrow. He and the defense lawyer was getting so frustrated because this guy was like, yeah, he seemed to be doing okay. And like, yeah, he referred him for competency evaluation because he felt like he could answer. He said things about the court he really wouldn't answer well, but he could maintain a conversation and think critically about like what he would do on the outside life and like what steps he would take, what things he would need. And he said that he showed that he had the ability to be competent. To him, he showed the ability, and that he had been medication compliant. He had had none of the positive symptoms of schizophrenia for upward of 90 days. Or I guess it wouldn't have been upward of 90 days because he actually got released early. But for the time that he was there, he had shown no sign of symptoms, that he was able to carry on a conversation and think critically. So he referred him early for his competency evaluation, which I have to go back because I know that's the one by Beasley, but I don't know what her conclusion was in that case. And everyone keeps saying he doesn't seem to grasp his peril. But at the same time, I feel like I've come to a conclusion, and I'm not totally sure. It was sort of after hearing everything today, I was sort of like, I feel like I'm coming to a conclusion. But he was saying, I think Beasley's the one who also said like he doesn't grasp his peril, but grasping your peril doesn't mean you shouldn't stand trial in my mind. Like if you are capable of standing trial, but you kind of have delusions of grandeur, like, oh, it's not going to be a problem. I don't feel like that by itself is a reason to not, that you're incompetent to stand trial. And it sounds like whether or not he's willing to talk to his lawyer, whether or not he likes his lawyer, like this guy, I don't like him either. I'm not big on the defense lawyer, let's be honest. But whether or not he'll talk to him, it does sound like he has the capacity to talk to him. And I don't think he's likely to use the capacity, but it doesn't sound like any of the evaluators think he's going to improve further. It sounds like they say his baseline, it sounds like the schizophrenic symptoms are controlled and that he has taken his medication and at least seems to understand the need to take his medication. It seems like he's at a point where it's time for him to stand trial. It seems like it's at a point where he mentally can stand trial. It sounds like none of the professionals seem to have a concern that he might never be capable of standing trial for this. And it seems like he's gone through the necessary rehabilitation. They thought that he was competent. I'll have to go back through my notes, and obviously we're going to get some more instruction. Like we're going to get juror instruction eventually. Not tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going in, this is supposed to be the last day today, but we're going in tomorrow, and then we have deliberation after that. And I feel like my work is going to get pissed at me, but like I can't do anything about it, and I really hope I'm not an alternate because I want to contribute. The brother did say he has never spoken to his brother again since the incident. The father said he does regularly go talk to him, and that he doesn't seem to have changed much to him, which to me then was like, maybe that's a bad sign. At some point, I think they also need the closure of having the trial happen, and it does not sound like more restoration or more time in a short stay facility is going to help him. Like if he needs a long stay facility, sure, but it sounds like another restoration period, it doesn't sound like that's going to do anything. So I feel like that's where I'm leaning at this point, that he probably is competent to stand trial, or as much as he's ever going to be, and that he is not the type of person who is never going to be competent to stand trial. It sounds like this isn't something that he was like born with. It's not something he got in childhood. This is something related to behavior, related to potentially drug use. It does sound like his brother knew he was doing crystal meth. I'm not sure when he started, but again, behavior changes happening around 12. He could have been doing it that young. And that he had a psychotic break, kind of compounded everything, made everything worse. Probably the drugs made everything worse. and then whether or not that had long-term detrimental effects, he's still competent enough that he could stand trial for a very serious crime. We gotta go back to Dr. Morrison again, where he just talks and talks and talks, and it's kind of funny how much he just goes. He just talks. That guy I mean, they'll be like, can you explain as pertains to this case, this one thing, and he will just talk I mean, even the like prosecutor tried to like cut him off. No, he kept going. He kept going for 10 more minutes after the prosecution tried to cut him off on just like a simple question. It was intense. This guy. So we have to go back to that tomorrow. And then we have to do closing arguments, actually. And then we're going to go another day. My work is going to be pissed with me, but I do feel like finally I'm at the point where things seem to be coming together, which is really what I was hoping was going to happen at this point. So, yeah, I should have filmed this yesterday when my makeup was like on point instead of me being kind of sweaty from like the smokiness outside. But that's the wrap up for today, and hopefully next time I talk to you, the trial will be ended and we'll be headed into deliberation, and I will have either changed my mind or solidified my point.